Hello everyone and happy 2020. I'm your host, Lucian, and welcome to Luck of Lucian. Now, before we move on with what's to come in cinema and in theaters of 2020, I want to review a movie from 2019. And no, it's not the movie Cats. I went to go see Queen and Slim with my fiance and two of her friends in the last week of December. And after I saw the movie, it got me thinking, is this really our legacy? Major spoiler warnings ahead for those who haven't seen the movie because we're about to get into some royally juicy details in this episode of LOL. Just a brief recap, Queen and Slim is a romantic thriller drama centered around two young black Americans who hook up on a Tinder date. It's here we learn that Queen, played by Jodie Turner-Smith, is an attorney, and that Slim, played by Daniel Kaluuya, is a bit of a God-fearing family man. Their date turns from awkwardly cringeworthily bad into a modern nightmare when they're suddenly pulled over by the police, who happens to be a racist and has a history with shooting unarmed black people. The situation escalates when Queen eggs on the officer while exiting the car, verbally confronting the racist cop, and gets shot because nothing's more threatening than a black woman raising her voice, clearly reaching for her cell phone. Slim then charges the officer before he can get another shot off, knocking the gun free from his hand, and the two men struggle on the ground for a bit before Slim gets the upper hand, grabbing the gun, shooting the officer dead in the street. Queen, who suspects how unfair the judicial system is going to be towards black people, suggests that they flee. That being a fugitive was far better than being property of the state. And because this is 2019 and because cops have dash cameras, the footage of the incident is broadcasted through all forms of media, and it sparks a national movement similar to the one of Black Lives Matter. And in that chaos, Queen and Slim have to flee from the north to the south, encountering various characters who represent different aspects of life that either help our two runaways or ultimately lead them to their death. The film's writer, 35-year-old Lena Waithe, who shot and released the film in the same year, went on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah to express this about her film. Check it out.
But like, black people are suffering. It's like, no, black people are human beings. This is what they experience, and joy is part of what they experience.
Absolutely. The movie to me is a meditation on blackness. It's a love letter to black people, in that even in the midst of oppression, we find joy because we don't have a choice. You know, we live in a world where we still treat it like second-class citizens, even though we're walking on land that our ancestors helped build for free. And so that is also a very weird dichotomy. It's sort of like we should be treated like royalty in this country, but it's the opposite. And you know, and I think for me, the movie is something that everyone can come see because everyone should come experience what the world is like through our lens, you know.
She also got the concept for the movie from disgraced author James Frey, fabricated details on his best-selling memoir, A Million Little Pieces. At the helm of the wheel is veteran TV, commercial, and music director Melina Matsoukas, whose iconic work has brought us Neo's Because of You to Beyonce's Formation. She also has a pretty lengthy track record of winning various awards for cinematic art, so you already know that this movie was going to be magic aesthetically-wise. So, let's get into a few pros and cons of this movie and the storytelling abilities of its creators. Pro. I really did enjoy how this movie was shot overall, and how the movie would use the beat of the music to transition from one scene into the next. Matsoukas' talents really do shine through, and you can really see some of the media aesthetic concepts come to play in her directing. One example of this was when Queen and Slim are driving away from the dead cop, and they exit stage left. In media aesthetics, this always signifies that your subject will always get away. There's also the use of the aerial shots to either draw you in or to take you out of a scene, and the night bar scene in which Matsoukas can really show you what it really means to stop and live life in the moment. It's the little things that I like. The aesthetics. Gone. The protest scene. And before I really lay in how I really feel about this scene, I just want to focus on the aesthetics portion of it. And for me, it kind of felt like it was rushed and very coordinated. And I know Melina Matsoukas was only trying her best to give us a representation of what a protest turned riot could look like, but for me, it felt like I was watching a play explain the chaos of a protest instead of actually witnessing the true nature of that chaos. Bro. I did enjoy the one montage scene where Queen and Slim were making love in the car while chaos is erupting around the country at these protests and demonstrations. I thought it was very classic and reminiscent of the Godfather's christening scene, and it was a nice way to show how Queen and Slim are finding love and acceptance for each other, while areas around the country are struggling to see black people as human beings. And that was a pun. That was a setup for a pun. Now on to the story aspect and how things are represented in the movie. Bro. I enjoyed watching all the characters in this film. I enjoyed watching all the dynamic relationships each character had, no matter how brief. For instance, there was one scene in which Slim had to rob a gas station to fill the stolen truck he just got. And he goes up to the cashier flashing his gun demanding gas. And the cashier says something along the lines of, you don't look like a killer to me. And he gives Slim a free tank of gas in exchange for holding the Glock. Meanwhile, there are papers and TV reports coming out with stories about what Queen and Slim had just done, labeling them as criminals. And I thought this scene did a lot to show you the discourse between reality and what goes on in the media, especially when it comes to victims of police violence, where you have media outlets smearing the images of black victims to make it seem like the officers' brutal actions were justifiable, which is an occurring theme in this movie and also in real life. God. This film and the story do nothing to change the status quo or even challenge it. And I know people were going to say, but Queen and Slim are the ones who shot the racist cop and not the other way around. But we've seen what happens to black people when they shot and killed cops before. And it always ends in violence and death. Take Micah Xavier Johnson, for example, when in 2016, he shot and killed 5 officers, and in a standoff that ended with officers sending a pound of explosives to his position of cover. I know the writer has gone on to say that it's her duty to reflect the times, but it's also an artist's duty to challenge the social norms in which we live in. It was also upon realizing that nothing would be challenged that I realized that all the black people in this film were universally fucked. Which made me wonder, who is this movie for then? Bro. I really did enjoy how Lena Waithe wrote all these dynamic characters once again. In particular, I really enjoyed Queen and Slim. There were certain aspects of Slim that I could see within myself, and there were certain aspects of Queen that I could see within my fiance. I really did enjoy how Lena Waithe was able to show the many complex layers of a human. And for me, it always made the motives of these characters a little bit unclear and heightened the stakes. And because you didn't know these characters could be trusted or not. You had characters who were womanizing murderous pimps who turned out to have a heart of gold. You had characters who would turn in Queen and Slim because they didn't want their son to follow in the same footsteps. You had characters who would go to the trenches and do everything right for Queen and Slim only to turn them in for a cash reward. Very dynamic. God. A bull scene with the little boy shooting the black cop. And again, this goes back to who is this movie for and what kind of message you're trying to send. When you have a little boy say something such as like, you don't have to worry about dying because you're immortalized, or something along the lines of that, because Queen and Slim have become immortalized icons that have stood up to racism directly. And then you have that same little boy go out in a protest and shoot a black cop who happens to be one of the good guys. It speaks a lot. There are other things about what this boy represents that I don't agree with either. Like, how is this boy supposed to rationalize that death is okay as long as you're immortalized by memory? And how Lena Waithe has presented this issue with our culture being obsessed with death and immortalized by memory, but doesn't do anything to challenge that. It's just kind of accepted, and the movie moves on, and when Queen and Slim die, the only thing that's left of them is a memory and a photo mural. Bull. Bro. The scene in which Queen tells Slim that God is saving him for something special. I like the metaphorical context in which this line is delivered, because if you really think about it, Lena Waithe is their God. But unfortunately, that something special is nothing more than their suffering for consumer satisfaction, which also says a lot about American culture. God. The overall message of this movie, it. Don't get me wrong, this was a beautiful love story wrapped in tragedy and rage that haven't felt since Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown were killed. But I feel like despite Lena Waithe professing that this is a love letter to black people, that this is also insulting. It questions the foundation in which protests really stand on, and at the end of it, nothing really changes. The status quo is still that it's open seasons on black bodies, and it just ends like that. If this really was a love letter to black Americans and a reflection that I've never been so enraged to be reminded of how far we have to go and how little we've actually have gotten. This movie inspires love, but gives no hope. It bursts rage, but does little to nurture it. And it presents the status quo as is, without actually challenging why it should be in the first place. Personally, it hurt to watch this movie. It hurt to not see a single person of color, with the exception of Slim's dad, come out on top in this crazy story that represents real life. It hurt to be reminded from a commercial product that despite all the good we've done, that we will always be the subject of unjust arrest and death because of the basis of our skin tone. It's a common narration in America itself, but it's one that I'm not willing to accept. Because while this movie has built up a dramatic love story around the issue, it tore down black people's ability to seek justice. I don't know who this movie was for, but this movie's legacy will not be the legacy of black people. But despite its cons, still go out there and see the movie. It's a film worth watching, comparing the similarities between the art and the realities reflecting. Although on the other hand, I can see why some people don't want to enable this and don't want to see the movie. Black suffering only appears to be palatable to Americans when it's presented in the form of entertainment. But then who are the ones who are being entertained by real life horrors of black Americans? Well, that's all the time I have left for Queen and Slim until it's released on DVD or streaming platforms for further analysis. Let me know what you guys thought of the movie in the comment section below, and what are your top pros and cons. Thank you for watching all the while, and remember, don't accept love letters from strangers. They don't know you.